put this event together. Karen Phillips with Restore Hope Arkansas. Hello, Karen, and Jim Petty with Strategic Realty Developers. Both Karen and Jim serve on our Affordable Housing Advisory Council, and you are here today in large part because of their work. So Karen and Jim, thank you very much for helping put this together. We'd also like to welcome several other distinguished guests. I'm going to read through a bit of a list here, so if you'll hold your applause until the end, and then we'll welcome everybody together. State Senator Jane English is here with us today. Hello, Senator. Sheriff Eric Higgins. Mr. Sheriff, thank you so much for coming today. Ben Gilmore with Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin's office is here. Thank you so much for representing the Lieutenant Governor. Daryl Swinton, former member of our Board of Directors and a former member of our Affordable Housing Advisory Council. Yes, sir. Thank you so much for coming, Mr. Swinton. My colleagues, Greg Hetrick and Erica Poe. You'll hear more from Greg later. Erica has done a lot to put this event together. Thank you to her. Ashley Gunn, who is with the Congressman and on staff in Washington, D.C. Those of you who have worked with Congressman Hill's office know that it's the staff who really get things done. So thank you, Ashley, for being here today. Well, that's true. You have a great staff, Congressman. Yeah. Also, hello to my friends Lori Trogdon with the Arkansas Bankers Association and Chris Padgett with the Arkansas Community Bankers Association. Hello, Chris. Hand up high. We're thankful that you guys are all here. So our agenda today will be as follows. I'm not going to talk forever and ever here. In just a moment, Paul Chapman with Restore Hope Arkansas will come up and introduce the Congressman. From there, the Congressman will come up and speak for 10 or 15 minutes on whatever topics he wants to discuss. We've asked him to give us an update on what's taking place in Washington, D.C. We haven't given him an agenda, so he's going to talk about whatever he thinks we need to know about for 10 or 15 minutes. From there, Karen and Jim will come up and lead us in a community development discussion. They'll make some comments, and they'll call on a few pre-designated folks to make some comments and observations. Then, at around 9:50, Greg Hetrick will come up, and he will recognize a couple of grants that the Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas has made in partnership with local community banks in support of two nonprofits, University District Development Corporation and World Services for the Blind. And we've got some big checks, and we'll have a celebration there toward the end. That will leave us with about 10 minutes to wrap up with some photos and some conversation. So at this point, I'm going to ask Paul Chapman with Restore Hope Arkansas to come up and introduce the Congressman.
Good morning. My pleasure to introduce my Congressman. Congressman French Hill is the 22nd member of Congress to represent Central Arkansas, serving his third term. He's a member of the U.S. House Committee on Financial Services, a ranking member of the Subcommittee on National Security, International Development, and Monetary Policy. Previously, he was a ranking member of the Task Force on Financial Technology and the Task Force on Artificial Intelligence. He's also selected to be a member of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. And prior to his congressional service, Congressman Hill was a commercial banker and an investment manager. He was founder and chairman and chief executive officer of Delta Trust and Banking Corp. And a little known fact, maybe, is that he's also the author of In God's Light, the Cathedral of St. Andrews Stained Glass Windows. That's a fact. You can find it on Amazon. I did this morning. Here's what I respect most about Congressman Hill. Throughout his careers, he has been active in civic affairs. Not only has he been the past president of the Rotary Club of Little Rock and chairman of the Little Rock Regional Chamber of Commerce, but in the time that he's been my congressman, we've had several conversations in which I have learned about his deep concern for the folks that we're talking about that need affordable housing. There have been many meetings that I've had with the congressman and his staff where he is trying to figure out how to bring solutions to complex issues like reentry, prison reentry. And so I will, this morning I'm proud to introduce him. And you've seen his career in financial development or economic development, but he also understands the importance of doing community development and how those two are connected. So please join me in welcoming Congressman French Hill.
Appreciate Paul's introduction. There's nobody I respect more in this community than Paul Chapman and his team and what they're doing to help those who are coming out of incarceration and reentry society. This is such an important issue, and I feel a real move and a real transition in our state that it's now a priority. It's now a priority. And what Paul's doing through his leadership, and he's not alone, there are many people that are working to make lives better for those 10,000 people we let out on parole every year in this state. So that goal of making sure that they have housing and work skills and can shift back to society, it's a big deal. And it's a super important thing that every one of our towns and cities should be deeply engaged in an old school strategy of, hey, we're letting you out on parole, here's 135 bucks, have a good day, and you walk out to what? You walk out and you may, depending on how long you've been in or not, you may not have a driver's license. And Pulaski County or Jefferson or somebody else may have a warrant for non-payment of child support. And that, you know, getting out for whatever you were in jail for, now you're just turning right around and getting back. And so this issue of transition assistance and planning is so vital. Paul's been a statewide leader in that. The governor through Restore Hope, which we're going to hear about, same issue. Couldn't be more grateful for what I see as bringing those projects to scale. My friend Muskie Harris, we only talk about it once a week, you know, and so I'm glad to see it at the federal level. President Trump signed into law for the first time ever the First Step Act. This was something that was a priority of his when he was running for president. And the First Step Act says case management, transition assistance, customizing help for people being paroled from a federal penitentiary. We've never had that approach before in the federal government. The federal government took that same approach, which was, we're letting you out, have a nice day, you know, see you later, good luck. So this kind of case management is important because drug and alcohol abuse is a big part of that, and that behavioral health issue is critical. So Paul, thanks for what you're doing. I thought I would talk a minute about some things going on in the House Financial Services Committee directly related to the topic that we have today. I want to congratulate the Federal Home Loan Bank for doing these around our district, not just in mine, but all the congressional districts. The Federal Home Loan Bank has been a great partner with our commercial banks. We did, when I was at Delta Trust down in Ashley County in Hamburg, we did a good housing program through the Federal Home Loan Bank grant program with one of our developers down in Ashley County. And so I know the good work that they do. And Eric, thanks for taking time to come up to Little Rock and be with our community developers. I'm going to start with CRA. Everybody else sees a lot of CRA officers. I see some CRA officers here I've known for a long time, Virgil, who he and I, we were just talking, we pioneered together. I was at First Commercial, he was at Worthen, when we pioneered the 1994 amendments to CRA during the Clinton administration, which was the last wholesale redesign of the Community Reinvestment Act. And it had some good things, and I think for big companies it worked really, really well. I think for small and intermediate banks, it really didn't. It ended up not working that well as you grew. And so there's been a lot of pressure to change CRA to make it more amenable to different bank sizes and modernize it. And then Ashley, who's been introduced, but my colleague in our work at House Financial Services Committee, Ashley and I did spend the last year immersed, I mean big time, on financial technology in starting this financial technology task force. And one of the biggest questions I had of Joseph Otting and Helena McWilliams over at the FDIC is this approach to CRA work for a wholly digital bank? Somebody who's going to develop a commercial bank that we think of today and fully required to comply with the 1977 statute, but they're digital. They actually don't have a geographic footprint. That exists, and there's going to be more of it. Plus, we have our traditional institutions, all of whom are represented here, who are radically changing their thought to client acquisition, client distribution, and not so much in Arkansas, but over time, we'll be less dependent on that deposit gathering branch system that we've built our whole careers on for the last 50 years in retail banking. And Otting says yes. I mean, that's one of the key features in his proposal is geocoding deposit locations and allowing the entity to take CRA credit and begin CRA planning wrapped around that. So that if you have 5% of your deposits someplace, then that would be a nexus for doing CRA requirements and CRA planning, even if you don't have a physical branch there. And I think that's very important. I think that's the future of finance. Plus, we want our digital partners out there on the asset side or the liability side fully complying with CRA. And this is where the bankers are supposed to be all nodding. Yes, we want them to have the same pleasure that we have. And so Cabbage, a big small business lender, or some of the people gathering deposits on an investment platform, for example, we want to make sure that they share the joy in serving their community. So Otting is coming to Capitol Hill next week and will testify before House Financial Services Committee on the CRA proposal. It'll be the first time on the Hill to testify. What Ashley and I would love is if you would think through questions that you have you'd like us to distribute to committee members to ask during his 4 or 5 hours with us. Things if you've looked at the notice, the rulemaking notice that immediately jumped out at you, you'd like us to ask a question about. And then we've advocated for a time extension. This is something the banking trade associations have asked for. It's a 60-day request right now, and members are advocating to extend that comment period. I talked to the comptroller about it personally on the phone last weekend. He didn't immediately say no, he understood, and because people I think want to experiment with these different measurement systems and see how compliance would work, whether you're at a small local family-owned community bank or a rapidly growing bank like OZK or somebody big and complicated like Bank America. So that's all I'm going to say on CRA, but I urge you to reach out to our office, talk to Lori, talk to Chris, give us comments from Arkansas banks that we can help shape that policy. Well, I should say, I want to say one more thing about it politically that's aggravating, and we have a meeting on this coming up this week too, which is that the Federal Reserve did not initially sign on with the FDIC and the OCC proposal. I think that's a huge mistake. We've made our voices known on that. It's politics with a small p. It has nothing to do with the Congress. It has to do with Lyle Brainerd, who is a governor of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, who is the designated community reinvestment person on behalf of the Board of Governors. And, you know, it's politics with a small p. I don't know what she wants. I don't know what more credit she wants. But she refused to have the Fed sign off on that proposal. So know that many of us in Washington are advocating for the Fed to, they can make any change they want to, but we want the main banking agencies on the same page for this CRA proposal. Now Joseph Otting, just to give you a sense for the politics, he says, well, you know, between the FDIC and the OCC, we have 85% of insured deposits. And I said, yeah, but Joseph, that's not the way to think about this. We have state member banks out there, and they're small maybe, but you can't throw them under the bus because, right? This just doesn't make any sense. And we've spent all this time talking about harmonization in bank regulation. And harmonization doesn't always mean identical, but harmonization means harmonization. And for them not to play is a disappointment to me. So I'll be advocating for the Fed to somehow be a player in one proposal. Please write the Fed. Please tell this to your friends in St. Louis to advocate that, because it really doesn't make any sense. And I'm telling you, it's not for a policy disagreement reason, and it's not for a political issue. It is a internal Fed thing. So let's have a little grassroots support. Show some moral outrage out there, people. Let's get that changed. We turn to housing now, and housing, low affordability housing, both single family and multifamily, and talk a little bit about what's going on in the House Financial Services Committee. Maxine Waters of Los Angeles is the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee this Congress. There are 54 people or so, maybe 55 now, on the House Financial Services Committee. It's a big group of people. The Democrats run the House, so they set the agenda for the committee. And the committee has been skewed, I'd say, towards urban housing struggles and homelessness struggles, because that's Maxine's world, right? It's right. I don't have any question about it for her, because the Los Angeles basin has a huge housing affordability problem, and everyone in here understands that. But when I'm on the committee, I'm talking about Little Rock and Central Arkansas normal life, in a way, where we have housing affordability problems, we have housing access problems, but they're not the same of San Francisco and Los Angeles or even New York. It's a completely different set of issues. We're still able to offer a family a 1.5 home for $700 a month or so, with very low commuting times and commuting costs to our citizens. Well, that's just doesn't exist, in these urban areas. Plus, they put access fees and make it very expensive to develop single or multifamily housing. You might buy the land and pay a city $500,000, a site for, and then you start looking at the per unit costs and then the rents that have to cover that for the yield, and it's very expensive. So housing affordability here is I think an easier conversation to have, and how we work together between home funds or Federal Home Loan Bank grants or regular HUD programs, or tackling it in different ways, because we don't have those barriers to development that they have in urban areas. One debate we've had, and I know we've talked a lot about foster care. I'm on the bill that allows kids terming out of foster care to get a housing voucher when they turn 18, because I think that's a gap. These are just a few people. This is not going to, in my opinion, disrupt the housing voucher program, but it allows people to have that gap capability. And Mrs. Waters is not that supportive of that idea, because she doesn't really support ideas where we prioritize voucher use. Maxine, again, representing an urban area, always know where she's coming from. She wants billions more in HUD constructed housing and billions more in housing vouchers, generally, because the challenges that urban areas face. We have a waiting list here too, don't get me wrong, but it's a different, as I say, it's a different order of magnitude. Likewise, the concept of housing first versus wraparound services. Because of the work I've done with Paul and what I've seen and the fantastic work done by Habitat, my work at the Chamber, my work, in banking, I'm a huge believer in wraparound services. And in the 5 years I've served in Congress, I've done a lot of work, as people know, with the VA here and the veterans community. It's probably where I have the biggest heart, is for our veterans and my work I do in casework. And Estella Morris who many of you know if you attend the homeless community meetings. Stella, Dr. Morris, runs that program at the VA. And she shares my view. She might not say it publicly. And a lot of people don't want to be saying things publicly about housing first. But to give a veteran that's got drug and alcohol challenges a housing voucher when they don't really, they're not stable in their job, they're not stable in their health, they're not stable in, they have no furniture, that's what the federal government says we have to do. It's called Housing First, no wraparound services. And I'm an inverted person there personally. I believe that we should connect vouchers with wraparound services for these most vulnerable populations, like our kids fostering out, like a behavioral health issue, and we can do this. But it's controversial in Washington, so I want you to know I advocate for that. I don't know if all of you agree with it or not. It's not that I'm against, we shouldn't pair this as, 100% one way or the other. What we want to say is that right now in our communities, if you're a wraparound service provider for the most desperate moral failings and economic needs that our citizens have, behavioral health, drug and alcohol treatment, a job, clearing up liens and problems, and then you also need housing. I think sometimes we do a disservice to say, well, here's a housing voucher, and we'll check you later. Good luck with the rest of it. I understand that argument, and I know it's controversial, but I'm just a big believer in wraparound service. And how does it manifest itself? Well, if you are a housing voucher user and you're a wraparound person, you don't get prioritized, because that's not how the system works. So I think we have some work to do on that. Opportunity zones is a big issue around the country. It's an issue here that's been worked on, and I hope we might have questions about that. And the last thing I'll leave you with is the importance of the mortgage market and stability in the mortgage market. So reform of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac is a real priority for me over the next 2 or 3 years. It's the last thing after the financial crisis in 2008 that the government never did anything about. There's been no reforms to the secondary mortgage market for the fiscal health of our nation and also for the proper functioning of that market. So we've got work to do there. But thank you for all that you do in your institutions to help our citizens find and access affordable housing and the services they need to be fulfilled citizens. And again, thank you, Eric and Federal Home Loan Bank, for putting on this discussion. I appreciate it very much. Virgil's writing a letter to the Fed. I got that good. And we've got our double ambassador of Little Rock Chamber awarded yesterday for being the most outstanding Little Rock Chamber ambassador in the city for 2 years running. Congratulations. Well done. Yeah. Yeah. So this was cool, and again, thanks to Ashley for helping putting this on, and Lori and Chris. We invite Kathy Cranager, who's the new director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, to come to Little Rock and do a roundtable with community bankers and take questions. And then yesterday, we invited consumer groups and consumer topics, kind of not necessarily bankers, but people working, advocating for consumers to visit with Kathy. We also had the Attorney General of Arkansas there as well to talk about that. She did a great job. I really appreciate her coming to the state. We've had a lot of good questions. Most of it was two things. I'd say the duplication between the traditional bank regulatory agencies and the CFPB. How do you reconcile that if you're a bank? Under 10 billion or over 10 billion? And we had a good mix of both, because not everybody may know, but if you're over $10 billion in bank assets, you are have the potential to be directly supervised by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for all the consumer statutes. And if you're under 10 billion, you're not. They're still in charge of the statute, but the primary regulator is to do those inspections at the bank. So we talked about that balance. We talked about their work for non-banks to make sure non-banks also provide consumer protection in the same way that depository institutions are required to. And then we talked about UDAP, which is deceptive practices. And most bankers grew up in a compliance environment where deceptive sales practices were really not a common legal compliance risk or thing, because they were so heavily regulated and all the products were approved and they're all subject to a statute. Most banks were not accused of deceptive sales practices. Maybe somebody at a see it, buy it now car dealer might have that situation, or some furniture guy, or some consumer finance like that. But now banks are subject to this, and the CFPB enforces that law now. And there's a lot of mystery, in what is a deceptive sales practice to some degree. A lot of it's trial court type decisions. So there was a lot of discussion about that. And I think that's an area where we could do more. And I think Kathy has put out guidance on it. And she was complimented yesterday by one compliance consultant who was in the audience, who works with banks in 12 states, he said, or something like that, who said that he appreciated particularly the guidance on that topic. So it was good. Again, thanks for all you do, and I don't want to hold you up from your day, so thanks for being a part of this, and again, my hat's off to the Federal Home Loan Banks.
Yes. I was late this morning. I didn't want to know if you go back over your speech.
It's on YouTube, and you also get a signed copy of In God's Light, which is my stained glass. I love to.
If I was back home and you saw me stand up here, there'd be gasps and moans, because I'm known to be lengthy in my speech and maybe even my emails if you've received an email from me. So the good news is, which is also the bad news, we are going to, between the three of us, spend about 15 minutes on a subject that we could probably spend 15 hours today and never scratch the surface. So my 5 minutes might raise more questions than answers. And that's really kind of the purpose, is to raise awareness and get you thinking about what is going on in the areas of affordable housing and also services, as the Congressman has talked about. My name is Jim Petty, and I have a company called Strategic Realty, and we do affordable housing development and in a lot of cases in collaboration with other service providers, nonprofits, and so forth. But I also get to serve on the Federal Home Loan Bank Affordable Housing Advisory Council, and that's why I'm here today. Just again, very briefly, so if you're here for a resounding informational, learning experience, you're probably going to end with more questions than answers, but I'll be here as long as I need to be here, and I'll exchange cards with you and share any deeper ideas that I might trigger. But what we do at Strategic Realty is develop affordable housing with the capital A as opposed to smaller A, and that in Arkansas, as it can be in other more rural states, can be tricky because of the economics and the dynamics of what we live in as a state. But it affects us all. It affects our schools. It affects our economies. It affects our growth. And so it takes a lot of organizations like yourselves and Federal Home Loan Bank and others that are here in the room to work together and pull off creating affordable housing. We develop across Arkansas and dip over into Oklahoma. I'm not an OU fan, so don't hold that against me. But We do it primarily with some of the funds that are available through Arkansas Development Finance Authority, and they've got good representation here. I'm going to give Brian Scoggins, who's the president, here in a few minutes, an opportunity to share. But we do development with their programs. Some are federal funds, some are state funds. Some of the funds that we use primarily in developing across Arkansas, in the Delta to Northwest Arkansas, are the Affordable Housing Tax Credit, the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit. It's a source that has been hugely bipartisan, hugely successful over the years, and it's the primary driver for the funding of affordable housing. We developed, when I started my company about 12 years ago, we developed in eastern Arkansas in West Helena. Anybody know where West Helena is? If you've been over there, you take a step back in time. But I can tell you, standing here today, that one of our best and most favorite developments is in West Helena. One, we got done. We did 29 single-family homes for rent at affordable rents in the $500 range, 3 and 4 bedroom units. We gave one of our first tenants a key to her house, and she broke down in tears because she had never been given the opportunity to have something that nice. And that's what the low-income housing or affordable housing tax credit, home funds, Congressman referred to that a minute ago. We have state low-income housing tax credits. We now have a National Housing Trust Fund that is, funds are out there. It's been a little difficult getting those funds out the door because the feds aren't always the most, they try to get it to fit one, one size fits all, and sometimes what fits in LA doesn't fit in West Helena. But those National Housing Trust Funds are earmarked for affordable housing and with a primary preference for veterans. And there's a huge need. We're working on a couple of deals in Fayetteville. Our company was selected to help develop veterans housing for Washington County. So there's lots of funds available, and even more so the need in Arkansas. And so it's going to take a continuous effort by everyone and creative approaches to solving these problems to just make a dent in. There's been a huge emphasis by the Walton Foundation of affordable housing in Northwest Arkansas, and as a result of that, I think they may be getting ahead of the curve, whereas some of these other more urban areas fell behind the curve and forgot that level of citizen, and it creates all kinds of economic problems. And so there's a huge emphasis by a lot of organizations up there. Again, like the Walton Foundation, we're working with a few other nonprofits up there, Endeavor Foundation, Mercy Hospital, they see the need, Tyson, and so there's just a lot of resources, and I could speak for hours and days about the details of it, but the need is there. It affects us all, and we have to work creatively and collaboratively together to solve that problem. And the way we do that is through organizations like the Federal Home Loan Bank and their grants and ADFA. And so, Brian, if you want to visit for a minute, just kind of give you a 2-minute sales pitch on what ADFA does, that'd be great.
Thank you, Jim. As he mentioned, we administer many of those funds that have been mentioned this morning: low-income housing tax credits, home funds, National Housing Trust Fund. And I've got two of my colleagues here, both who have 2 jobs and get paid for one. And so please understand we're being official with. I've got Matt Barker, General Counsel and Vice President of Multifamily, and Roe Arrington, who is our Vice President of Public Finance and Single Family. And so appreciate the opportunity to come here and network for a large part, hear different perspectives on these issues. And please understand that we're working hard trying to make sure that we efficiently use these funds that are provided to us to have the greatest impact on the state of Arkansas. We're always open to looking at things from different angles because we don't have all the answers. Sometimes we get stuck in our way of looking at things and need to get alternative viewpoints to consider as we're administering these funds. Appreciate the opportunity to come and sit down and visit with you. Short stop speech.
Yep, no, that's great. They have been a primary driver for affordable housing in Arkansas. They were created for primarily that purpose, and they have they've been a great advocate and resource for Arkansas. So I think I'm out of my 5 minutes. Karen's looking over here, so I'm going to turn it over to Paul Chapman, and he's going to share a little bit more, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. I work for an organization called Restore Hope. Before that, I worked for an organization called Fellowship Bible Church, and my responsibilities at Fellowship were not only to oversee some direct service in our city, but also to give money away. So we had a member-driven fund, and it was through the work at the church and primarily through the work of giving money away that I got to meet a lot of individuals that were doing really good things. But the issue both in the work that we were doing, which was heavily influenced by Paul Stevens is here with the Exodus Project, his pre-release program. BJ Brady runs residential services. Brian Miller, these are all organizations that we partner with. Brian Miller is the executive director of an after-school program that partners with cops and schools called the OK program. And ACC, Kelly's here with ACC. So I've been partners, better community developers for years. And the thing that frustrated me, and it all kind of culminated in, we had created a program, and I was very proud of it, because we had tracked data. And a lot of times in social service, especially if it's religious social services, you don't track data, right? But we had tracked data, and so, you know, I took my baby to a potential funder that could help us grow, and I remember this guy, he said, it was good. I did not like it at the time at all. He said, how many folks can you help? Because it looks like you're doing good work. I said, 200, 250 if we really just get it this year. And he sat back and he was like, how many folks get out of prison every year in Arkansas? I said, well, right now, 11,000. And he goes, you don't have it. I was like, but we're killing it. And he goes, you need to spend some time thinking about how you're going to take that to scale. And I said, well, if you would pull out your checkbook, which was the reason that I was here, you know, I would, how far are you on a scale? And he was like, you got the wrong model. And that bothered me. It bothered me greatly. And so, not that the individual service wasn't right, but what he set me down the path of trying to investigate was, how is it that you actually unlock, instead of trying to duplicate services, which I saw there was a lot of duplication of services, because if you're meeting someone who's in crisis in Arkansas, generally there are some pretty common things you're going to run into. Right? Everyone. I don't care if you've got the housing, if you've got the job program, if you've got the school, you're going to run into these set of programs. The sheriff here influenced me greatly when you were with Little Rock Police Department, right? Same things, right? Commonly. In fact, there was a study done in Northwest Arkansas that said when someone presents for a crisis level service, they need a house. They're homeless or they're couch surfing, so effectively homeless. Right? They also have, on average, 3 other things that they're also in crisis for. And so if you're just solving for one, I think, Jim, you had said it, or Congressman, you had said it, right? And these other 3 are not going to make that one as effective, right? We put them into a house, but they've got no job. And they've got a transportation issue, so they can't get to the job again. Maybe you could solve that, but you can't solve it 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now. And so they get fired. Or maybe they have a substance abuse issue right now. So you got them a job and you got them a house, but substance abuse issue is going to take both those things away. So unless you actually have a strategic wraparound plan, that you can either do one of 2 ways to scale, right? You can either build a bazillion-dollar company that's going to do all that, or you can try to actually put a little infrastructure in place that will coordinate the resource that would be governmental and non-governmental resource, exist in every one of our communities at some scale. And that's what Restore Hope is. And so we wrote the governor a strategy paper about 4 years ago that was just that. Hey, you need to take a collective impact approach or a systems approach. And we went to Fort Smith, and that's where I had the distinct pleasure in working with Karen Phillips, who now is a Restore Hope team member. And she might talk a little bit about this, but the reason that we went, I didn't want to go to Restore Hope either. So a lot of my stories I didn't want to, or didn't like what they said, but I'm too stupid or hard-headed to get out of the game. At the time, the worst child welfare crisis in Arkansas was happening in Fort Smith. Sebastian County had 800 kids in the foster care system. They were about a third the size of Pulaski County. At the same time period, Pulaski County had 535 kids. 800, 3 times smaller. And so 1 in 34 kids in Sebastian County was in here. That's not true any longer. Right? It started to turn about 2017. Also, the neat thing there is because it was a collaborative effort between governmental and non-governmental, you actually saw decreases in jail population rates. So 2 years running, and I think we're about to hit our 3rd year running in Sebastian County, the intakes into jail have decreased, which is a really good thing. So, which just goes to illustrate the interconnectedness of all of this. And so I believe I'm at 5 minutes. Here would be the nugget. Is if we really want to make big change in our communities, we're going to have to invest a little bit of money in infrastructure that will allow the service providers who are doing good work, it's excellent work that's happening there, but they can't do it all and they cannot scale. Right? So the ability to scale has to be in us providing a bit of infrastructure, and there are some key components. You've got to agree upon all these disparate actors have to have a common goal, because working together is tough. Right? I irritate lots of people, I'm sure. And so what keeps us together? Tomorrow, after I irritate you today. And then how does communication happen? And how does it get back to the sheriff? Sheriff, how do you know if your programs are effective? Right? If you're sending someone into a housing project and counseling, and how does that get back to you? So that you could evaluate the front end of these things. So that constant communication. And then there are some other things, but those are 2 big ones. Common goal amongst community actors, and then how does constant communication happen? And then if you can get those 2 things solved, the rest of them start to become easy if you've got a little bit of infrastructure to solve. And that's what we found true. That was our aspirational vision 4 years ago. I'm telling you, it's working, and we'd like to do it across Arkansas. And if you're interested, find me after. Karen Phillips.
In a short time like this, we couldn't possibly point out all of the good things that all of you do. I know many of you personally, and I know the work you put in and the passion you put into your work every day. I think we can all agree that Federal Home Loan Bank has played a tremendous role in the success of many Arkansas housing opportunities over the years. Help programs for down payment assistance, SNAP for owner-occupied rehab, the partnership grants that we'll later hear about today, AHP, Affordable Housing Program competitive funding for affordable housing, all through Federal Home Loan Bank. In just the past 3 years, they've invested $5.5 million in Arkansas. And that investment is coupled with ADFA funds and makes those work. And so you add that to other projects, and that is the gap financing that really makes these projects work. I have been on the advisory council for 8 years now. It has been a privilege and honor to carry out the economic development and housing needs, to carry those to the Affordable Housing Council every quarter to Dallas. We haven't always agreed on everything. It's the classic conversation, Marty, rural versus urban, homeownership versus rental. Daryl, you remember those conversations. But I can tell you that the process is always fair. and we've been able to increase monies in programs that help home ownership, such as HELP and SNAP, while maintaining good options for the development of rental housing in our district. One project in Fort Smith was funded last year that helped adults that were recently aged out of foster care with affordable housing in an apartment-like setting with those supportive services like life skills and budgeting. There are many ways to collaborate by working in groups, learning from each other. I learned from many of you in my 10 years that I had leadership in a change. And that has moved me forward in so many different aspects of my career because I was able to talk with people across different viewpoints and different aisles and learn perspectives that were not my own. And that's been very, very important. And I know Steve Mosier with USDA, you are doing some good work as far as getting people to talk together around specific topics. Do you mind just telling us a little bit about those few collaboratives you put together?
Sure. Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Congressman, for allowing me to be here today. And as I was looking at your tagline up there for the Federal Home Loan Bank, member-driven, community-focused, I think about members. And members has to do with passion, and it has to do with partnerships. And collectively, we can accomplish so much more than we can individually. So often we have an issue, and we think, well, we can go to one source and we can solve the problem. But that is unrealistic. Most of the time, it takes a collective, collaborative effort to accomplish difficult things. And I've worked with Karen for many years. Before I go into all the partnerships that I've been working on and individuals I've been working with, I want to share about rural development. Rural development is a mission area of the USDA. We help build communities from the ground up. We have rural housing programs, we have rural utility programs, and rural business programs. And many of y'all, I know, are familiar with what USDA rural development does, so I won't go into that any further. But we do have $1.9 million in community facility money for the state of Arkansas in the disaster funds that we need to get spent in Arkansas. And it's the counties pretty much that run along the Arkansas River, based on the area we serve, determines the grant amount as far as the percentage. But if you can help us get the word out that we've got nearly $2 million in grant money, and that's more grant money than we've had in the community facilities program in my 37 years with USDA that I've ever seen, that we need to get that spent in Arkansas. I appreciate getting that word out. The other thing is we have a Reconnect program. We've been working closely with Nathan and Quinn with APTA on the governor's broadband plan, trying to get out this Reconnect money. We had one project funded up in North Arkansas recently that was announced this last week on the Reconnect program. But we have another $5.5 billion, $550 million to spend on broadband phase 2, and there also is going to be a phase 3. So we had 5 applications from the state of Arkansas that did not get funded because of some technicalities. We're trying to work through those to make sure that we can move those projects forward. But we also need some more projects because broadband is a huge thing that is needed in rural, especially rural Arkansas. On the partnership things, that's really what Karen wanted me to talk about. We have had, first of all, I want to talk about the Arkansas Community Economic Development Alliance. That is an alliance that has been put together a few years ago. The state, federal partners, nonprofits, and foundations. We meet quarterly. And I will be glad to share with you, we have a mission statement of what we try to accomplish, but really what we're trying to do is move projects in Arkansas forward. And we meet collectively 4 times a year, and we can also meet on an as-needed basis. We have a needs assessment, so if you have a project in your community that you would like to see go forward, we have a needs assessment. We fill that out, and at the quarterly meetings, we share those needs assessments, and we try to put a working group together that has a desire, a passion to see that project move forward, that has funding resources and technical assistance resources, and we put that working group together to try to move that project. Greatly needed in law enforcement. We're on the rural workforce. We also have a extension of the Rural Workforce Summit that Karen has been working on, and brought in several
I'll tell them about
partners.
that. That's a construction apprenticeship program, and it's really exciting because it's been moving. He wants to do this across Arkansas, and it'll be construction apprenticeship. We can even use it in the jails through distance learning, which is a very interesting thing for all of you that are involved in affordable housing and development. Thank you for that.
Yes, and thank you, Karen. And also part of that program is the alternative census.
That's right.
So there's a lot of moving parts to that. Is gaining momentum. The last thing I'll talk about real quickly, there's a whole lot of things I can talk about, but is the beginning farmer. I've had a lot of partners come to me, and for some reason it seems like I'm in a position where people come to me and say, this is what we want to work on, and I try to put together a coalition or a partnership. But it's beginning farmers, socially disadvantaged veterans farmers. And we're working, Farm Bureau came to me and they wanted to host a meeting. Actually, we're meeting next Tuesday evening if y'all are interested in being part of that. It's 11 o'clock at Farm Bureau. It's open door to come, but we're going to be working together to try to address those things. So, that enough, Karen?
Yes, thank you so much. So see him after if you're interested in any of those groups. My tagline on my email is "We're all working together." That's the secret, and I don't. That was said by Sam Walton, and for it is very important to community development, and more than just than meeting together to talk about these things. The collective impact model that Paul was talking about is on the horizon for Arkansas. We believe it is a new way of service delivery to communities that can increase positive outcomes 100-fold. It's data sharing, transparency, accountability to one another, using common tools and common communication and evaluation. The people of Arkansas, impoverished single mothers, prisoners without hope for a future, families struggling to maintain a roof over their heads and to get the jobs daily, are counting on us in this room. Please take time and network with one another after the end of this so that you can find out how you can be part of this collective impact model and be part of community collaborations across Arkansas. We want the world to know that it's not a secret that we are working together.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Jim. Good morning, everybody. I'm Greg Hetrick, the Director of Community Investment at the Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas. Like a number of you here, I've got 3 teenagers at home. Back in the day when they were, first one was in kindergarten, she came home and we asked what they learned, and she said, I learned about flexibility. And turns out the teacher and their grade in kindergarten, they learned life skills. And so flexibility is a life skill. So we're going to be flexible this morning. Part of our agenda is to talk about and make check presentations for the partnership grant program as well as an AHP grant. Still going to do that. However, our original plan was to ask folks to come up here and try to do the photo op with the checks. Not going to quite make it work here. So what we're going to do is talk about the awards and then ask everybody to step outside onto the patio for the presentation. The lighting is challenging and the space here. So as soon as my comments are done, I'm going to ask everybody to relocate outside and be quick and efficient and take these photos so the Congressman can continue on his schedule and make this a good morning for everybody. So, I do appreciate everybody who came before me. You mentioned how you and your organizations leverage the programs of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas. One of those programs that Karen mentioned is the Partnership Grant Program. What's really unusual about this program is it is a grant that provides matching dollars for operating funds for community-based organizations. It's not like most every other program out there, like the affordable housing programs we talked about that are sticks and bricks oriented. This is to help organizations that are doing community development, economic development, to keep the lights on, to pay for the pre-development costs that are hard to allocate funds from these sticks and bricks programs early on. So today we're celebrating a true partnership. 4 financial institutions are supporting University District Development Corporation with matching funds for partnership grant. Altogether, these 4 institutions, Simmons Bank, First Security Bank, Bank OZK, and Arvest Bank, all teamed up to provide, with Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas, $34,500 to University Development Corporation. So that partnership makes a big impact in the community here. We've known Barrett Allen, the director of University Development, for a long time. He's received these grants before, and we were really excited to see him back at the table to receive more grants, because we understand the mission of his organization and the great work in the community that they do. So congratulations, University of Hetrick. And special thanks to all the banks and bankers that recognize that work and bring that to us so that we can help support your mission here locally. Second is a grant we've made and approved just a few months ago at the end of 2019 to World Services for the Blind. This is an organization that's been in Little Rock for 50 years. They do a tremendous job of providing training and vocational training for those folks who are visually impaired. If you know anything about them, you know that they also provide housing while they provide this training. So with the assistance of and support of Arvest Bank, we've got a $475,000 grant going to World Services of the Blind so they can renovate their facilities, which also includes housing opportunities for formerly homeless folks that are going through their program. So we were talking earlier with Sharon from World Services. They are 2/3 of the way through their fundraising campaign. Our grant contributes to that. So if you can talk to your friends and neighbors to support that organization to get them to their full $3.1 million goal, that would be fantastic. So congratulations. Thank you, Arvest. Appreciate that. So what we'll do is ask everybody to go outside. The folks related to the partnership grant, if representatives from each financial institution, and the congressman can follow Cindy's lead and head outside. Everybody's welcome to go, but we're going to take a big picture of the whole group, then individual shots for each financial institution.